Hello, hello. Hello. Hey, how's everybody doing? Alright, great. We're going to try to stay in line with our tradition of starting on time, although I think we're about a minute past, so sorry, Tom. Alright, thank you. Welcome to Emergent Savannah's Money Needs community. We really appreciate you all joining us this evening. We are going to go ahead and get into this program. This is called The Growing Edge, a look at Savannah's emerging fresh food culture. This is part of a series of Money Needs community events that we started in winter of last year, where we invited people to slow down, reflect, and take stock. And after this long year with politics and social injustices and all these differences and everything, it's been very wearing and tiring on the soul. So we were like, hey, let's slow down. Let's reflect on what's going on around us, especially here in our own local community. And that led to a program which was about how change happens. And that featured a short documentary called 100,000 Beating Hearts about one farmer in South Georgia who has created a good change in his heart, his family, his farm, and his own community. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch this documentary for a second time. We're going to let it sink in, and then invite our panelists up onto the stage to reflect on what they saw, and so they can share with us what's going on here in Savannah and how we plan on working to grow all their efforts. So first, before we get into the film, we have a tradition at Emergent Savannah, and it's called Meet a Stranger. So we want everybody here in the room who's with us to look around, find someone you don't know, introduce yourself, and get to know this person a little bit. We're going to give you about 2 minutes to do that. So go ahead, meet a stranger, look around, find someone you don't know, introduce yourself. All right. On to the second tradition of our evening. After we do Meet a Stranger, we'd like to follow up with Hug a Stranger. No, Johnny? Come on, Johnny. All right, so if everybody please, if you can, just find a stranger. Let's give each other a hug. Let's just share those endorphins real quick. Let's get the spirits lifted. There we go, yes. There's some genuine hugs out there. I could see it. I could feel it from over here. It was nice. All right, just let you know that we are an organization that runs mostly on emotion and energy and not money. So we wanted to introduce to y'all our new friend, old Blue Face Bones. He collects any donations for our group, so we can keep these things going, keep Money Meets Community going, as well as other programs that we put together. So we'll be passing this around, so if you can and are willing or available to, donate to us, we greatly appreciate it. Just to get a feel, how many of you are here for the first time tonight? Any first timers tonight? Awesome. All right, nice. A couple of y'all, this is good. So I'm assuming a lot of y'all have been here before, so you kind of know about what we do and kind of how the night runs. Tonight we're going to go ahead and show this documentary. It runs about almost 15 minutes long. And as soon as that is done, we'll go ahead and get the panelists up on stage so we can move along into the conversation and dig deep into what's happening here in Savannah with our guests. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kill these lights and we'll start this film for you. Audio technical difficulty. Give me 2 minutes. Get a little deeper with your strangers that you just met. 2 minutes and we'll have that running for you.
Well, how are you, sir? I'm good. I'm sorry, I'm still stuck in my face. That's all right. Well, I can talk to you. Well, I grew up here. I stay here. I come to this part every day. Really. People live and work downtown.
Out of it.
I started this beard in the 1970s. When I walked out of high school, I started running this beard. I've had it ever since.
Savannah High, or where you graduated from?
Clap if you can hear me once. Clap if you can hear me twice. All right, we got that taken care of. Thank you for being patient, and we're gonna go get to the film now.
I was a full-time commodity cowboy. All I thought about was how many pounds of beef I could squeeze out of this farm at the lowest possible price, with no real focus except pounds of beef and how cheap I could get it. Today, I never ever think about how many pounds we can sell. What I think about all day, every day is, how can I make this land better? What if I put compost this way? What if I put a cover crop that way? What if I graze it in a different way? What can I do to make that happen? we're standing here on my farm in the edge of Bluffton, Georgia. It's one of the poorest counties in the nation. Wonderful land, wonderful climate, and poor people. The census says that 102 people. We can't count but about 50. The only thing you can buy in Bluffton is a stamp if you get there between 8 and 12 during the week. If you need a gallon of milk or a tube of toothpaste, it's 12 miles to the store. And what happened to Bluffton is what happened to so many small rural towns that had a purely agrarian economy. With the centralization of industrial agriculture, it simply wasn't needed anymore. There was no economic reason for this town to be here, so people moved to places where they could get better jobs. From here, I can see a dozen of these old stores in Bluffton. And Mr. Greer Mansfield had a store right here, general merchandise, and Mr. Herman Bass had a store here. About an 8-foot alley between them. And I remember my mother going in and Mr. Herman saying, "Well, you must have not got what you wanted at Grill's. I see you went in there first." They're very competitive. As far as the impoverishment of rural America, nobody of my father's generation said, "Let's just suck all the money out of this little town and let it dry up and blow away." That never happened. My father told me that in 1946, a salesman invited all the farmers to a fish fry, and he brought 200-pound bags of ammonium nitrate fertilizer with him. And his ask was, get out into the pasture, put it down on a pattern, and leave it for 3 days and come back and look at it. And when my father came back, the grass was this much higher than the other grass. You know what he said? He said, "Shit, I want my whole farm to look like that." And we put nitrogen fertilizer on every acre of our land every year from 1946 when he was doing it until 1995. What we couldn't see is that ammonium nitrate fertilizer killed the microbial life that fed the soil. It was an unintended consequence. I went to the University of Georgia and majored in animal husbandry. It became animal science, and it was very industrial cattle farming. And I came back and did that for about 20 years and was good at it. But every year I liked what I was doing a little bit less. The industrialization of agriculture sought to make this farm a factory. Nobody sane and normal should enjoy watching a cow in a feedlot or a hog in a gestation crate or a chicken in a battery cage. And I came to hear about consumers that wanted grass-fed beef, and it appealed to me. And I started slowly changing my production practices. And the first thing that I did was give up confinement feeding of corn. I gave up subtherapeutic antibiotics, and I gave up hormone implants. And that was all I ever really intended to do, and then decided that using chemical fertilizers and pesticides on the pastures was as wrong as using hormone implants and subtherapeutic antibiotics. That's my daddy and Will Bell Harris. I was taken at my wedding. One time a flower of them got put on his lapel. My daddy talked more like Foghorn Leghorn than I did. And my father was not involved in me changing this farm from an industrial farm to what it is today. He died of dementia, and I didn't start the process until about 1995. So we didn't have to have that discussion. He would have been opposed to that. And rightfully so. We made money every year. Never lost money. Ever. Come on, up. There were many, many times that I woke up and said, what in the hell was I thinking? Because we went from no debt to borrowing $7.5 million to build processing plants and operating for a number of years in which I literally lost money every year. Well, I didn't know if I was going to lose the farm that my great-granddad had established 130 years earlier, the farm that I was supposed to leave for my children and put my wife in a position where she could have died in a rented mobile home somewhere. And those were dark days. I'd work till dark. I'd go in, I'd drink a bottle and a half of wine. I'd go to sleep. About 2 o'clock, I'd burn through the wine. I'd get up, go to the bathroom, make coffee, put my boots on, and go again. Yeah, we took incredible risks. Today, I'm very glad that I made the changes that I made because the farm is again profitable and cash flow positive, and 2 of my daughters and their spouses have come back to work on the farm. And at least that last part probably wouldn't have happened in the other scenario. I used to consider what I did to be a very simple business. I had nothing but cattle, dogs and horses to work the cattle, cowboys to work the dogs and horses. We raised the cows, we fed corn to the cows, we sold the live cows. That's a pretty simple business. And then I got into an even more simple business. Today, we don't feed animals, we feed the microbes in the soil. The microbes feed the soil, and the soils feed the plants, and the plants feed the animals, and they breed and they grow, and we turn into meat and sell it for money, which is like blood that pumps through our bodies to keep it all going. And it's really a beautiful system. And what's most beautiful is that every generation, the animals are healthier and healthier, happier and happier. You know, my daughter had really been after me to bring sheep in. I think because she thought they were cute, but I brought them in because we desperately needed them. There's a lot of symbiosis, a lot of synergy that comes from having cattle and small ruminants in a polyculture together. The internal parasite that affects cattle most are brown stomach worms. Sheep don't care about brown stomach worms. The internal parasite that affects sheep most are barber pole worms. Cattle don't care about barber pole worms. So if you've got the 2 species out here together, like these are, it's like a dead-end street with the life cycle of brown stomach worms in the sheep and the barber pole worms in the cattle. I don't know why any serious cattleman in this country wouldn't have some small ruminants out there with them. It's profitable. So this is a pasture that has been grazed off real short, and they got poultry is out there now. They're out here in the pastures in these houses. There's nothing constraining them at all. They could walk from here to Atlanta if they wanted to. Those houses are portable. We move them once a week to give them an area that's free of pathogens and parasites so they stay healthier. Another reason is to move that chicken manure around. If chicken manure is all concentrated in one place, it's toxic. But if it's moved around and it's feed for the microbes in the soil, corn flies and face flies, which are pests for cattle, lay eggs in the manure. Chickens scratch into the manure and eat the larva, and it's feed for the chickens, and it breaks the life cycle of the pest for the cattle. So it's a great example of symbiosis. Prior to about 1995, we had about 700 cows, and we sold the calves fairly soon after weaning. Since then, we've increased the carrying capacity dramatically. We still got about 700 mama cows, and we have about 1,000 goats, about 1,000 ewes, about 100 sows, and then the poultry, chickens, turkeys, geese, pigs, and ducks. There's about 100,000 beating hearts on this farm on any given day. Our pastures are better than they've ever been because we don't till them up, we don't use chemical fertilizer, we don't use pesticide. It's more teeming with life, there's more nutrient density. The organic matter in our pastures has gone from less than 0.5% to over 5%. Over about 15 years. We had never seen a bald eagle on this farm until about 5 years ago. Bald eagle, look at it. And today we have 26 that live on the farm. The Department of Natural Resources says this is the largest eagle population in Georgia. It's a sign of the ecological health of this farm. You know, I'm different from most of the people that I know in this sustainable humane food movement, in that I am one of the good old boys that produced food industrially, and then I went commando. And I still talk to those people, they're still my friends. And one of the things that they say is, well, I mean, what you're doing is fine, Will, but you can't feed the world like that. And my response is, I don't know that I'm supposed to feed the world. I think I'm supposed to feed my community. We have about 120 employees. We're the largest private employer in any of these counties around here. We have bought a number of houses and storefronts and lots in Bluffton. About 10 of these houses we've renovated for the purpose of employee lodging. These next 3 houses belong to me. I've got my livestock manager and farm events manager live in that house, my organic farm manager and his wife live in that house, and my poultry manager and his wife live in that house. So John Muir has told us that in nature, when you pull a string, you see that everything is connected. There's no reason to believe that the health of the soil is not connected to the health of the community. In rebuilding the soil, we are rebuilding a farmer middle class. Just about everything I see makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to see these eagles flying across. It makes me feel good to see the squirrels playing in the trees. It makes me feel good to see all these animals, both wildlife and farm animals, expressing instinctive behaviors. I think it's healthy for me and my family and my employees and my customers to eat food that's raised like this. It is food as nature intended food to be. You know, the expression is, I get paid for what I was made for. Technically, I work 16 hours a day. Because 16 hours a day, I'm on this farm, if I'm not physically on it, I'm thinking about it, but I don't feel like I work at all. I would do for free what I do for a living. I hope I'm not preaching too much. I'm just fucking telling you. This is my church.
All right. Thank you again for sitting through that. It was 100,000 beating hearts, and just a quick little tidbit, a fact behind that film. The director of this documentary, he is Savannah. His family's from Savannah originally, so it's kind of a fun little fact there that kind of ties back to where we are. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Tom now, and we're gonna move on to the second part of this evening.
Thank you, AJ. I'll ask panelists to come up if I could, please. We have 3 folks.
Tom, is it possible to get a copy of that to post on Facebook page? I mean, really?
You can just go on the web, YouTube. It's completely accessible in an open, kind of open environment. And if you follow Peter Big and see the other work he's doing, you'll see the brilliance in what he's trying to do. To follow what AJ had said, I did email Mr. Big after we saw the documentary, and I said, you know, Big is a familiar name in Savannah, and he said, well, we landed in 1840, and I just thought that was so classically Savannah, right? We landed in 1840, and then he kind of went on from there. He comes back occasionally, and when he comes back, we certainly hope he'll connect with us and we can have him meet people and that kind of thing. So, but it is brilliant in its own way. Yep. Well, thank everybody for coming out tonight. Very kind. Have got a great crowd. People kind of came in a little bit later. That's great. Great to see everybody. We are really happy to have 3 food justice activists here with us tonight, and we're going to ask them to help us think about this issue of food. You know, clean food, healthy food, homegrown food, and this idea of food justice. I'll introduce these folks very briefly, and then my first question will give them a chance to kind of deepen our understanding of who they are. Kristen Russell's in the middle, and I'm going to introduce Kristen because I've known her the longest. Kristen's been in Savannah for 17, 18 years now. 19 years, I'm sorry. Kansas farm girl. We were lucky. She found Savannah. She found us and decided to bring her talents here with Kelly Pearson, who was her college roommate up in the Minneapolis. And they had this idea of opening a fair trade coffee shop, whose motto would be something like serving up coffee in community, if I remember right. And then also the co-founder of the Forsyth Farmers Market. And Kristen, as many of you know, has contributed to hundreds and really thousands of people in many, many different ways in Savannah over the almost 20 years that she's been here. I just have the good fortune to meet Mark Bowen, and he is from Herndon, Virginia, right outside of D.C., although he does have, he tells me, good roots here. His mom and dad both from West Savannah, and so he's been coming back and forth his whole life from D.C. to Savannah. He brings 11 years combined experience in food policy, prison gardening, food education, organic farming, and youth food justice. And so we look forward to getting to know you better tonight. Mark, and thanks for coming out. And then Pixie Talent, who I just had the pleasure of meeting, and they are from Asheville. This is unusual because usually, at least over the decades, people from Savannah have gotten so tired of trying to change Savannah that they go to Asheville to like rest and to live amongst their people. So the fact that you've come here is like, you know, yeah, maybe a canary in the coal mine moment for us here. There you go. They've been in Savannah for about a year and active with Food Not Bombs, and also have done a lot of mutual aid work and disaster relief work in Puerto Rico and in other places as well. So thank you very much for being with us. Well, let's see. I thought maybe we could start with this question. We've just seen how one man sort of had a change of heart and became a food justice activist in his own way. So I'd be curious, and we can kind of do this popcorn, whoever the spirit moves you. What led you to becoming a food justice activist? How did you find your way down this path?
Hello? Okay. So my work actually, it actually began for me as a small child. Growing up in Herndon, Virginia, that part of Virginia was before white flight hit and urbanization was coming in. It was actually a pretty little racist town that I was in. Every morning I had to fight on the bus stop. I had to fight on the bus stop for my dignity. And in school, I wasn't doing well, and I had a rough time in my home. And so the only place where I found respite a lot of times was in my parents' garden, in the backyard. That was where I would find healing, and that's where I found peace, and that's where I found rest. Fast forward about 20 years, I'm getting out of prison after 2.5 years. And what happened is that I was hurt so much that I went around and hurt other people. And then when I got sick of that, I said to myself, I wanted to start healing myself, and so I wanted to start healing other people. So when I got out, I first was introduced into community organizing, and I was part of in the early 2000s, the anti-war movement. I worked on eminent domain issues and lead paint contaminants in Baltimore, and some other issues, and cop watching and stuff like that. And that was really tough, especially like the stories I would hear in cop watching. And I've had cops put guns to my head before because they didn't like the work that I was doing and trying to protecting the community. And then at that time, I was also part of a CSA and graduating from college. And you know, I was feeling hurt again because activism work is very hard and it weighs on you. And so I did not want to go straight to the workforce. So the farmer at the CSA I was at was like, hey Mark, come on over and work with me as an assistant farmer on the farm. And then when I found myself back on the farm again, I found myself in the same place I was at as a child. I said to myself, wow, I'm healing again. And I'm out here on these 300 acres of land at this 150 share CSA farm, and I was removed from the community. So I started asking myself, how can I bring this work that I'm doing here on the land right now to the social justice values to the social justice issues I was addressing in the community? And so from that, and I remember the day I asked myself that question, since that day, 11 years I've been doing food activism work.
Thank you. Beautiful.
CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. What it really is that if everyone in here bought a share into a farm, the farmer produces that food and gets distributed among equally, so everyone's an owner in the farm.
That's a tough story to follow.
You're the woman to do it.
Yeah, my story is quite a bit, maybe longer and slower. I grew up on a farm and could never really let go of. I mean, as the same. You feel when you're working in healthy soil and you're growing food, and there's definitely a certain amount of peace and wholeness that you feel. And I never really lost that from coming off the farm. I went to college. And I have very, very conservative farm roots and went to a very liberal college in Minnesota and did some social justice activism, kind of around some environmental and factory farming issues in college, and just had a tough time getting those to kind of jive, like how do my roots and then sort of the stuff that I've learned, how are they going to work together? And in general, when I came to Savannah, when I thought about opening the Bean, it was about more just about like American consumerism, and that was kind of the part that was clear to me, was that we have really a long history of really poor consumer habits, and maybe I would try to act to change those, but I just kept coming back to food and growing and gardening, and really, my heart is with the family farm, and I can't imagine the demise of the family farm. And so there's always been a part of me that's wanted to work towards that. And then I got consumed in running a business, and that went well for a while. I mean, that's great. And then I guess 9 years ago, got together with a group of women to start the Forsyth Farmers Market with the idea that it should be for everyone. And one of the things that really was clear to me is that we will never change the way food is grown and food is consumed in this country unless everyone is involved, not just wealthy people who can afford to shop at expensive places or pay whatever, but it's just really that everyone needs to have a connection to the food that they eat, and deserves a connection to the food that they eat, and deserves that bit of health, not just physical health, but emotional health too. And so the group of us started the farmers market with the idea that that will just be the beginning, and it was a coalescing of several other efforts in town, and that was many years ago, and things 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So here we are again. I'm excited to share the stage with 2 much more active activists. So hopefully that will come up later in conversation about where are we now and where are we going.
Thank you.
I'm starting to see a pattern. I also grew up on a farm my whole life. So everybody start living on a farm. I was starting to giggle because it was like a documentary of my childhood, with like the driving out an hour to go get gas. So hopefully you didn't run out of gas before you got there. So my family's generational farmers, and I grew up living on a farm. And now I'm the radical vegan, so it's really interesting at holiday events when there's an animal on the table. Then after I grew up on the farm, and I didn't really understand it because it was just my lifestyle, I didn't know what it meant for farming and growing your own food and the necessity of it. And then I went to college and got my degree in recreational therapy, and I started feeling my roots coming through with farming, and then I started realizing the healing practices of it, of gardening. And then I started creating modalities for different facilities using gardening and cooking with the food that you just produced, and how that's correlated connection and the healing aspect that was talked about. So I was a part of an organization called Heinz Feed Farm, where I started a gardening program working with persons with traumatic brain injuries. So I taught them about gardening and going in and watching their faces as they took the produce that they just grew from their garden and taking it to the kitchen, and how they were able to make food out of it, and how that made them feel, and the respect and responsibility that comes through with that. And then later, I realized I got introduced to an organization called Food Not Bombs. And Food Not Bombs is a direct action, nonviolent direct action that shows that instead of spending money on war or bombs and military, we are supposed to be this flourishing country, yet we still have people who are hungry and homeless over here, and also with the consumerism and the waste that comes with the consumerism, and how food is just getting thrown out. This perfectly good edible food is getting thrown out that could feed families. So what we do is we collect the food that would otherwise be going to waste, and we cook it up and we share it out to everybody. And it is to show activism towards showing the highlight of the houseless folks, that this food that just got thrown out actually just fed about 100 people today. And to kind of bring that highlight of this shouldn't be a thing, we shouldn't have to be doing this. But we are, and we're there, and we're standing in solidarity with them, and to let them know that they are part of the community. And so then with that, I also am a co-starter of the Food Not Bus. I've built a home out of a school bus with my partner. And so what we do is it has a full kitchen in the back, an industrial kitchen, and we travel across country to share Food Not Bombs and go to different chapters, because Food Not Bombs is international. It's been going on for almost 40 years. So we work and coordinate with different chapters. We do education pieces. We help start up new chapters, and also bring food culture back to different cities and communities and understanding. I'm also, Food Not Bus also got called into action to do mutual aid disaster relief. So last year when the hurricanes happened, we ended up in Immokalee, Florida, which is a migrant farmers community that gets greatly ignored. And it is in Florida, and people don't even think about it. So when we got there, we ended up cooking in a little thing, like tractor trailer thing, shipping container, there we go, shipping container. And that shipping container got converted into a kitchen, and Food Not Bombs ended up making 30,000 meals in a month for the community. And then from there, we got called to action for Puerto Rico. So we went to Puerto Rico twice now for a 2-week span. And there we were able to see the food culture for disaster relief, and like FEMA was sending over snack boxes, and which was like Doritos and ravioli and little fruit cups and peanut butter cups for families. And from there we were able to also see that the community actually kind of stood up on their own and said, you know, we're not going to wait for y'all to like try to figure this out. We're going to take care of ourselves. And so they started doing like guerrilla gardening on their own. And we started working with them on their own personal agriculture, and they were squatting in buildings and stuff, and like, because they don't have power. So they ended up supporting each other that way. And then I'm going to be on another panel to talk about the agriculture in Puerto Rico and how we can send seeds over, because they're in great needs of seeds so that they can produce their own food. So there you go.
Thank you. Well, thank you all, and I mean, you can get just a feel for the depth of background and sort of depth of experience that these three people share, and just again, they just live in little Savannah, Georgia, which always makes me so proud and so happy. I would be curious from the documentary, is one or two maybe points that you noticed in the documentary that really particularly spoke to you? Is there something there that you think was really the key wisdom that you'd like to bring forward?
I can go first. It's a small thing, but he did say that, he said, I don't know why people wouldn't think that the health of the soil is directly attached to the health of the community or something like that. And that's I have a pretty deep-seated belief that that's really true, that we have much more connection to the natural world than we're conscious of or able to comprehend or whatever, and that over the slow course of industrial agriculture in this country, and like you said, it's not like very many people set out to say in the 40s or 50s, hey, we're going to kill our soil, what a great idea. It wasn't like that. It's just an unintended consequence, and now we do have a better understanding of what's happening, and it's definitely fixable. And in fact, it's kind of shocking how easy it is to fix. It doesn't take a lot of kind of renewal to start regenerating soil. And I just think there's a really super deep connection with all the critters that live in the soil, on the soil, top of the food chain, whatever. And so that was definitely a touchstone for me in that movie documentary.
Mark, Pixie, something that really stood out for you, and if not, that's fine.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was really powerful is once he was able to actually start purchasing properties and putting people in those homes. For me, that's what everything always goes back to. I always try to have this meta-analysis that says, how does what we are creating relate to power and building power that is collectively owned? I mean, this is this one gentleman doing this, and that's great, but that's the kind of thing, and I'm going to talk about it more when we get to other questions, is like, how do we build power in purchasing properties and owning our own food system? So seeing the power that he was creating in that community, I thought was really important. And the next steps, I'm sitting down thinking, like, what are the next steps for him in doing that? What are the next steps in resisting oppression, resisting patriarchy, having an anti-racist framework in that work that he's doing? So, he holds a lot of power, and I just hope to see that moves in another direction.
That's great. Pixie, do you have something that struck you particularly, or no? Thank you. We're going to kind of focus now on Savannah, if we could, and then, I've got a couple more questions. We'll hear what people have to say, and then we'll open this up for a Q&A, obviously, because I can tell already that there are people in the audience that have plenty of curiosity about what they're hearing so far. I would be curious, as you look at kind of where we are in Savannah today, where do you feel like the energy is? What do you think the obstacles are in Savannah these days as we move kind of down this road toward a more fresh food, more of a food justice movement in Savannah. I mean, where's the energy and what are the obstacles in this movement right now as you see it in Savannah? And again, whoever wants to crank that up, give it a swag, give it a try.
Sure, y'all don't want to go? No? Let me just make sure everyone's familiar with the work that I do. I work with Forsyth Farmers Market. I'm the manager for Farm Truck 912. So what I do is I bring the farm truck to different communities throughout Savannah. I purchase food from out here, from our vendors at Forsyth Farmers Market, and I bring the food to mostly low-income, but majority black neighborhoods in Savannah. And one of the hallmarks of that program, is that, and this goes for the market as well, is that when people spend their food stamp dollars, their $1 is actually worth $2. So it's improving access to folks who otherwise would not have access to fresh, healthy, local food. Because usually, the same folks would not be able to go into Whole Foods and get that same food because it's way out of their budget. And I don't think Whole Foods takes food stamps, do they? No, I don't think so. Making that food available, and that actually starts with the work and vision that Kristen actually created. I'm very happy to be in that position. And in the context of Savannah, my thought is, what other purposes can that truck serve? Do we want to just stop with just food access? I don't want to see it stop with food access. I want to see the truck actually become something of and for and controlled by community. We can start changing people's minds about what food justice looks like and what food sovereignty looks like and what food democracy looks like if people have a chance to if the community has a chance to say, these are the foods that we want to see on this farm truck. These are the educational programs that we want to see come off of this farm truck. And so I really want to see the truck really become a vehicle that serves communities' needs, beyond food access.
Well, in terms of what is emergent in Savannah, I think you can see it here. On either side of me, farm truck's great. I love having Food Not Bombs here, and they're out a lot, like true activists at different events and around town. And something else that I see emerging that's fairly subtle, but I've been, kind of working in the food scene here for a long time, and I'm starting to see quite a bit more collaboration between groups, which is really exciting to me. There's a lot of we've got some people from Suga, Savannah Urban Garden Alliance in the room. I'm not sure that there's anybody here from the school board, but there are some of the folks who work in nutrition for the school system who are working really hard and who are pretty passionate and committed to growing a farm-to-school program. And also, I think Suga and school board and whoever else is working on enlarging our school garden program, which I'm pretty out of the loop these days, to be honest, but I'm under the impression that that's happening, that more and more schools are having gardens. And what I see is it's a very slow change and it's subtle, but I do see that children, just like, 20-somethings there's a slow acceptance of various cultural changes. Like 20-somethings might recycling is just the way it is for them. They feel strange not doing it or whatever. And I'm seeing like younger kids start to grasp the idea that food or gardening is something that they should know about. Or just the notion that food is it's not fast food, it's not restaurant food, it's not just something you need from the grocery store, it's actually a kind of an integral part of your life. And I see that kind of sneaking back and that's really exciting. Could be wrong, maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I've had some good conversation with kids. I had a great Halloween experiment I'll tell you about. I offered kids a variety of healthy foods, candy, even like a jar of honey, and I was shocked that every single one of those children chose, the honey went first, the vitamin C stuff went second, the granola bars, and then the last thing chosen was the candy, and I was blown away. So I saw that as a really good harbinger that like maybe the message is getting through. And I also hope for a coalescence between, there's been a very, very strong healthy food movement in Savannah and nationwide for a long time to say, hey, bad food is killing us, and it's especially killing low-income communities, minority communities faster than anybody because of access. And I'm starting to, I really want to see that merge with the idea that we have a food sovereignty. That if you are, even if you're eating healthy food that's produced by really large corporations, they're the same people that are killing you with the bad food. So owning the food and owning the source of the food and understanding. I'd really like to see those two movements, food justice become a much bigger part of the healthy food movement, and I think that's happening in Savannah.
So you want to know what's emerging and
where you see the energy right now, and then if you have obstacles you just feel like are standing in the way of better things happening right now in the world that you are kind of working through.
As far as what I see emerging, I really like the community gardens. As someone who's come recently into Savannah, seeing the community gardens, specifically I've been working with, and Food Not Bombs has been really close with Aki Gardens, which is a community garden that is free to anyone. On Saturdays you can just go in and start working on the garden, and you take whatever is grown for your family or whomever you are. And I think that's wonderful. I just walk down the sidewalk and I just see them everywhere, and it's really great. And the farmers market is taking food stamps, right? Yes, okay. And so the farmers market and taking food stamps, I think, is incredible. And with Food Not Bombs, that's where we do our food collection. And now that the farmers market has become more knowledgeable about who we are, now they're just like flagging us down and like setting out their own bins for us to come and collect food. And they really love that we're going to be using something that they grew and knowing that it's going to be cooked up and made for people in the actual community. And it's really great. Some things that I'm starting to, what I am seeing as challenges, as someone who is working in as a volunteer in an organization that is all volunteer based, is getting people the ability to have the time to do volunteering because of the work, and with like rent and stuff going up and all the new buildings that are going up that are raising more rent, that's making younger folks having to work full-time or double or 3 jobs, just being able to sustain themselves. So getting people to actually be able to use their time, and the people that are able to use their time, it's their one day off. And so being able to have that knowledge of these are the community members that you want to be giving back into the community and having the time to be able to do it. Also with the new spaces that are getting built and the tourism is the focus. As someone, like I said, I'm from Asheville, and I was like, I came to Savannah from Asheville. Just seeing how that has just like massively blown up, and then all the locals have just left because it just wasn't sustainable for people to stay. And I'm starting to like see how like tourism is a big thing in cities, but it also does affect the community members, the actual local people who have the ability to bring up the grassroots of Savannah and to make these things happen. And so when people get pushed out and they have to move further out and they go towards having to get their food from like Walmarts and stuff outside of the downtown area, they're not being able to be a part of these beautiful community gardens or being able to go into the farmer's market and get their produce, or be involved in different organizations that does food justice, doing justice for food. So that kind of culmination of things happening, of just it's becoming more focused on money and tourism and things that people who are just going to come and go, and it's the people here, the locals, that need to be supported so that these grassroots organizations can be sustained. And yeah, that's what it is.
Well, you know, you really hit on an interesting point, which is about in the film and your point about how everything is interconnected, and so the idea of tourism and rising rents and how that impacts people's ability to be present to their own community and to be present to a little garden plot, how everything kind of all interconnects in one way or another. Folks in the audience, you've been very kind to tune into what we've been doing here. I think if it's okay, we'll just open it for Q&A, and it's 8 o'clock. We usually try to finish up by about 8:15, so we're in great shape. We do ask that it's a question that comes from the audience. The answer comes from the stage. So questions rather than speeches and presentations, if that'd be okay. But if folks have questions and want to dig deeper or challenge, please, now's the time. And red shirt in the back.
Something that I hear addressed very much is what happens to the waste. I've been working with a composting company for a year now. That's kind of in a rough condition at the moment, but I would just like to ask about y'all's opinions and ideas about what should happen with the composting situation. Yeah.
Okay. So some curiosity about kind of the composting situation in Savannah.
Yeah, it's not legal here, so that's a situation. Composting isn't, not that it's illegal, but there isn't really any policy. And we ran into this with the farmer's market. There's gardening. We ran into it with gardening. Like there's just not any rules. There's not any sort of structure set up, policies to allow it or disallow it. But in general, I think, and this might have been an obstacle too, I think we do have a bit of a tendency to just disallow things in Savannah from a governmental standpoint. If it's new, if it's different, if we don't know how to manage it, we just say no. And so in composting, I think that's important. There's not really an area. There's no policy, so it's a gray area. So I think that would actually might be a fairly easy solution. And the folks that kind of shepherded and lobbied for the gardening, I forget what it's called, but I'm just going to call it policy, to get it through the NPC and get city council to pass it and everything, did a great job. And the animal ordinance that recently allowed people to keep chickens in urban areas. And so there's already kind of a path being forged. And I do see that commercial composting could be the next thing that gets through at a local level, and it probably would need to be a county level too. I mean, it is an industrial process. If you're going to have a really large compost operation, you don't want that happening in an urban area. But it would be great, and there may be somebody working on it, I don't know, but it would be great to see that as an allowed use of property, because it is absolutely something that we need that is a huge piece, integral part of a healthy food system, is keeping waste out of landfills and putting it back into the soil. So, stay tuned if you hear something coming up about a compost hearing, go and root for it.
There you go. Orange sweater. And if you'll say your name, that'd be great.
My name is Rain. And I wanted to ask you about, since you have done work with rehabilitation in prisons, what do you envision for the future of prison abolition and transformative justice through your work gardening? That's a broad question, but it's there.
I'm glad that you use the word abolitionist because I'm not a prison reformist. I am an abolitionist. I do not believe prisons should exist at all. Even though I did work in a prison for a while, and as a director of horticulture, teaching youth how to actually garden and farm and to use value-added products and stuff like that, so they can empower themselves. But I think there's a lot of organizations out there that are already doing that good work around prison abolition, such as Critical Resistance. They're doing good work around that. I would like to see a program where prisoners, as they're coming out, even though I'm a prison abolitionist, I would like to see programs inside of prisons like the ones I had, where they're learning these skills, but then when they are leaving out of the prison, they are transitioning into a program in the community that's going to allow them to keep on using those skills that they've learned, and it's going to improve their life in all sorts of ways. It's going to improve their politics so that they can be a more forthcoming and active person in their community. It's going to keep them healthy through the food that they're eating. So I think that that's what I would like to see realistically. I think that is a step towards abolitionism and sovereignty. And on top of that, those prisoners going back to those prisons or just working in prison abolition as activists to get rid of the system that's hurting people.
Yes, ma'am. If you just say who you are, that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Glenn Glover, and I really respect the work that all three of you are doing. It's phenomenal to me. I just wondered, with your background, do you think food co-ops or CSAs could work in a place like Savannah for the locals? You know, as you were saying, forget your name. Pixie, yes, I'm about to say that. And as you were saying, something for the locals. I know large cities like Chicago, they have the co-ops. So I don't know if there's a critical mass you have to have or education.
So the question has to do with Savannah, the size of Savannah, kind of the gestalt of Savannah, and what do you feel like the possibilities are in this particular place?
I can touch on that a little bit. I've just learned through living here, and I think this is actually a pretty important piece of the food scene in Savannah, is that it's incredibly hard to grow food around here. You know, in the Midwest, you have very productive farms, you have good soil, and there's a history of agriculture. Whereas Savannah is a port town, and you got to go 40 miles inland before you don't have sand under your feet. So I actually think that's a pretty important piece of why so many CSAs have started here, have tried to, and food co-ops have started here and failed. Because it is just not easy to, I know a couple young farmers who've given up. I mean, who've tried in the last few years and just can't make it. And part of that is that it's tough to grow food here, so it's hard to, especially if you're new to a CSA, if you're new to that idea, you want an abundance of, you want to buy your share, and then you want an abundance of lovely food to show up at your door, and that's just not always the case in South Georgia. You know, the insects in the soil make it pretty hard. The flip side of that is we can grow food all year long, with the exception of August maybe. But so you know, there's pros and cons, but I actually think that's a pretty important part of why it's been hard here. That said, yes, it should work. There's always the growing of awareness for people to understand that you know you're not going to have tomatoes in the winter, you're not going to have collards in the middle of summer. So there's part of that surrounding a CSA that you have to really be okay with living seasonally. Just you're going to get sick of kale, sorry. But you really have to be, there has to be a group of people who are committed to supporting, you know, that particular farm. I haven't given up on it yet.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first I have to confess that I have a very shallow understanding of what goes on in Savannah fact, I have a shallow understanding of what goes on in the United States soil. I'm from abroad. But during my visits here in Savannah, one of the prominent issues that were obvious to my eye were the homeless folk. And I know that the subject of homeless people was touched upon by the panel. And I was curious, has food or healthy food activism had a success story of putting these people into employment rather than just feeding them?
Tell a story.
I'm not trying to.
No, you just opened up Pandora's box. Thank you. So that is something that, especially with the with Food Not Bombs, is we say that we're staying in solidarity and we're not a charity. It's acknowledging that we're sharing food with people. We're not just feeding people. It's like, here you go, there you go, make it through your day. It's also a part of activism and acknowledging the houseless culture and what is involved with that. How did they get there? Why are they still there? And a lot of that is with like where I was saying, with like buildings being put up and all these like rents and new restaurants and all these fancy things, fancy to me, and buildings and homes and stuff that are getting shut down, and it's displacing families. It's displacing people out of their homes and putting them on the streets. And so it's, how are we getting them jobs is also how are we giving them shelters. If you walk down one of these streets, you'll see so many homes that are boarded up and closed down, and they've got like just dismantled. But then you go down the next block and it's shiny and new because SCAD bought up a new building, or the new Starland building or something, instead of giving back into the community of restoring these homes where these people and these are living on the streets and they just lost their homes because they didn't make that paycheck. Because everybody is pretty much working from check to check, and if they didn't make it that week or that month, then they lose their space, and everybody's like couch surfing professionally. So it's about how do we get them food, water, and shelter, right? And is the community actually building that up to provide that for the people, so then they can be a part of society, so that jobs are available. But right now, giving someone a job, if they don't even have a place to sleep, or they don't have a place to eat in their own space, you got to face that, and then you can move forward down to where they can go into, so they can be a part of society and the community. And yes, I'm using hand actions because it's like, whew. So that's how I feel as far as like giving more than just food. I hear you, but can't do much on an empty stomach, and then you also can't do much if you don't know where you're going to sleep that night.
I would say that in Detroit, there's been a lot of work, and you will see lots of examples of folks that growing food has become their work, and it's been used as a way to bring people to work. So, I mean, if you look around the country, I mean, Savannah's Savannah, I get it. But if you look around the country, I think to your question, there would be some examples where you might see that. And if you want to talk later, we could dig some of that out for you, which we'd be happy to do. This gentleman's been very polite here, and then we've got a question back here, and then we'll be careful about time.
For the latecomers, where can you see the video that y'all are watching, or what's the name of the project y'all are working on for this here?
You can find it on YouTube. It's a YouTube video. 1,000 beating hearts. You can just 100,000 beating hearts. I'm sorry. Or check our Facebook page. I'm told. And then look at his other little videos. I think you'll see how cleverly this gentleman is helping all of us see a different future. And there was a question back here.
Yes, my name is Shafia. I'd like to follow up on the questions about CSAs and homelessness. Statistics show that in many cities, folks who are homeless, many of them are working. They are working, but they cannot afford the rents or the mortgages that are going. And Savannah, I'm new to Savannah as well. I get it, the Savannah is Savannah, but I would like to ask the panel, you know, a number of people have raised this issue. What are the possibilities or concrete possibilities that we might be able to sit down and deal with a coalition of folks who are dealing with food, folks who are dealing with housing and gentrification, and folks who are dealing with, for example, the fight for 15, you know, raising a minimum wage to a livable wage here in Savannah. And then if we can build a movement, you know, that can bring those things together. In other cities also, there's begun movements where people, the community has done community gardens such as what Occupy has done, but it's the people who are building community gardens and connecting them together to build food systems. So I'd like to know the panel's thoughts on the possibility of bringing those three sets of activists together. I'd be willing to work, you know, on that. What are those possibilities? Are people talking to each other? Are folks willing to meet? Has there been any kind of cross discussion?
Thanks. Take a shot at that.
The most concrete example, and actually a city that is very comparable to Savannah, is in Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, Mississippi is one of the most progressive cities, believe it or not, in the whole entire country right now. Those folks have been doing that work down there for at least 20 to 30 years, building up cooperatives in that city. They have cooperatively owned gardens, they have cooperatively owned schools, they own about 124 different buildings, collectives of people do, that look like people in this room, that look like people on the west side, but they've put in the work. And like you said, Shafia, they're having conversations with each other. Their intentionality is proven to work for them, right? So if you want to see a great example of it, look up Jackson Cooperation Jackson. They're actually doing this work in a city that looks and feels a whole lot like this city. It's just like Shafia is saying, are we ready to put in the work? Are we ready to have the conversations?
Thank everybody, and I think we need to thank our, I'm sorry, we got one more question, there we go.
No, we're from Sugar, and so if anybody knows the location of a community garden, could you just write like the address on it and drop it here? Because what I would like to do is make a map, an updated map of community gardens in Savannah. So.
Great. We need to thank our panelists. And just to say, one of the things over the past 3 years that has happened, I think, on this platform is we get to notice who in Savannah is trying to make a difference, and you begin to, at least for me, many of us, I think you begin to get a feel for, well, this is where the energy really is in this community. And I think tonight, at least for me personally, just to say I met some new energy, and I appreciate that very much. Not that it matters, it probably matters more to me than you, but I really do appreciate hearing and feeling that new energy. Interestingly, a couple of things people are interested in sort of dovetail into the two things that Emergent has coming up next. On your tables, you'll find that we put some index cards and some pens. And what we're going to try to do tonight is this. We'd like to do some pop-up potlucks. Some pop-up potlucks. So here's the idea. If you'd be willing to sponsor a pop-up potluck at your house, what you need to do is take one of these white index cards. If somebody would just hold one up so I can, yeah, all right. Just take this white index card, put the word pop-up on it, potluck pop-up, and put your name, an email address, and a phone number, okay? Before you leave, if you'll put those in, where's old Mr. Blue Eyes? Where's Mr. Blue Eyes? Can he become visible? There you go. And we'll put Mr. Blue Eyes right out as we walk out the front door, okay? So if you'd be interested in hosting a pop-up potluck, just put your name and a way to get in touch with you, and we'll reach back. And the idea here is, of course, that individual people can collect other people, and we'll link these potlucks together and see if we can't get some of that conversation going. So it's interesting that the last question kind of led into that idea. The second thing, just to say, is our April program. Scott Boylston and Ryan Madison, both SCAM professors, are going to talk with us and share with us some work that's being done. And the question really is, how is public policy in the built environment being used to encourage or discourage diverse communities? How is public policy in the built environment being used to encourage or discourage diverse communities? Now you'll notice that we frame this question in a way that avoids some of the buzzwords, right? The question really is, who gets to live and be welcomed where? And that question is becoming more and more important in Savannah as we see economic and demographic shifts taking place, as to your point. And so the April program, Scott Boylston and Ryan Madsen, they'll present this in some ways in a fairly academic fashion as a framework, and then they'll have lots and lots of visual examples of the way that both public policy and the built environment encourages people to be connected to one another and discourages people from being connected to one another. And we'll see where that program takes us again in terms of just getting people thinking about things. We do have one other tradition, which is we like to go around to the American Legion after these events and drink healthy beer and eat unhealthy chicken wings or salad or whatever. Right? No, it is what it is. But we hope that the quality of community that we build over there and the conviviality will somehow, counteract maybe the food, which is not the healthiest food in the world. So thank you guys again, great job. Thank you guys again, great job. AJ, thank you for getting the AV under control, always great. Technical, thank you for a lot. Good stuff. And, thank you again, we'll see you next time. And if you didn't sign our email list, please sign the email list, all that. Remember, if you want to do a pop-up, potluck, your name, your contact information, pop up, and we'll start to spread this out. Thank everybody so much.